Hey everyone, welcome to my studio. This week in the studio, I am going to work on finishing up this Smalti mosaic. I want to pull some Filati for an element that goes around this way. And so that has to be done first, but it looks like I'm about 1/3 of the way done. And over here, I was planning on framing these, but unfortunately I went to go look for my frames, and instead of 8x10, which is this size, I had 5x7. So I didn't even know what I had. So I went to order the frames and they were out. So now I have to wait for them to come in, but I can still prep this by painting the edges on this mosaic and this mosaic. So finishing up those two, and one more thing. Now, I've had these 3 eggs for a little bit of time, but now we are at the beginning of March, so we're coming up on spring, and I thought about maybe doing one of these. This one's already been primed on one side, but I would need to prep this if I was going to do it. And this one I also need to prep because I want to paint it white before I was thinking of putting beads in it. Anyway, that's it. This simple mosaic of a chick, and so I just want to show how I've sketched it out, and I've pulled some nails and I'm getting ready to start. A handful of hand-pulled Filati that I'm going to put in this mosaic, and I have got nowhere to put it. So I guess I'll have to tidy up. I can't put this down anywhere. I had cut a few pieces up to start just to see what my colors look like, but I wanted to explore cutting as I go. This is it, my solution to Filati storage. Here I have got one set up, and I put the other one right here, and I can then sort out the Filati however I wish, and it's just a nice system to hold the pieces while I'm working. I thought I'd show today how I mix up the Thinset. I start with an Admix because it just makes the Thinset much, much stronger, and I'm just mixing up a little bit because I'm only going to be working maybe for 2 hours. So I'm using a cup, and I plan on filling it up to about right there with the Admix. Looks kind of like Nope. That's good. For this next step, I put on my N95 mask just for when I am mixing up the Thinset. I don't want it to billow up and breathe it in and get it in my lungs. I keep my Thinset and my grout in plastic containers, and I have to label them because even though they're completely different, they sort of look the same. So I've got my Admix here, and I'm just going to be scooping it in there and mixing till I get a consistency that I like. Again, I'm wearing a mask right now to protect my lungs. You can see you always add, I always add quite a bit more Thinset than there is liquid in there. The shelf life is about a year. You can extend the life of Thinset in your studio if you store it in plastic containers. Like that consistency, I'm just going to make sure it's thoroughly combined. I add the liquid first because that way I don't end up with anything dry on the bottom. It's always going to get whatever's on the bottom mixed in. There we go. So now the next step is to set my timer for 5 to 10 minutes so that it can flake, and then I'll be ready to use it. Now I'm going to try using this to set the Filati, but if I have problems or if it's not as easy as using Apoxie, then I'll switch to Apoxie and I'll just use this for the Smalti. All right, now my Thinset has been sitting here for 5 to 7 minutes. It's slaked. I need to give it a nice stir again. Then I found it's easier for me to work if I have it in a baggie, and then I can pipe it where I need it to go, and it just works better that way. But at first I have to fill the baggies, so. Then I just clean off my spatula. Sometimes I use a spoon for that. Close the baggie, make sure it's sealed. It can be a disaster if the seal pops open, which has happened to me. And then snip the corner. There we go, I'm ready to start. I cut through the fat part of this one, and then I remembered that I had used one of these type of melee in the pull, and that's where it is. It cut cleanly, so it's a good Malmischiato, if that makes any sense. So I finished working on the Filati portions. I made this swoop, and then a couple of areas coming up. So there are 5 total areas. And when I have an element that's different, I want to try to use an odd number. It's more pleasing to the eye. And this swoop is supposed to mimic this swoop a little bit there, so I sort of have a couple of those. Now I just wanted to tell you my experience with the Thinset. It's definitely more squirrely than using the Apoxie sculpt, because it's not firm like Apoxie sculpt, so it doesn't hold the pieces, and so they wibble wobble a little bit more. And there's definitely a time thing, just like with the Apoxie. I feel like there is this time crunch. You can only do a little bit at a time before the Thinset will start to set up, and so you have to work quickly. And so I was going to try to cut the Filati as I went. Unfortunately, that was just not working at all. I ended up having to scrape areas off and sit there and cut a bunch of Filati up so that it was ready, and then put the Thinset on, and then put the Filati on as I went. That worked much, much better, simply because it set up so quickly. So I'll let you have one more look at I put some millefiori in there and some cut rods as well. There's the other area and the 2 swoops. And that's it. That's putting it together. Thanks for watching. See you next time.